welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Harry, because I'm a freelance football journalist. Just a quick intro from the view of the pitch before we go inside to chat a little bit more about tonight's game. But yeah, really poor result for Newcastle. Chasing in the evening, not a great performance. We heard from Eddie Howe. We'll get a bit more inside. So, yeah, in the concourse at Signal Iduna Park, and really quite a flat atmosphere in that press conference just come out from Eddie Howe. Felt like another opportunity missed for Newcastle. The thing that I took from that press conference was that Eddie Howe said that Dortmund hadn't seen the best of Newcastle in either two games, and you've got to agree with him. The first game they were sort of stunted in midfield quite a lot, and there seemed to be a specific plan to do to Newcastle what PSG had failed to do in the first game at St James's Park. In this one, the attacking sense of midfield was where I think Dortmund really won this game. And every single opportunity they could, they had somebody peel off the back of Sean Longstaff and Bruno Guimaraes, and that meant that every single time a player was free to get a run on the Newcastle defence, and Newcastle ultimately fell to defeat. Lots of talk in the press room about Joe Linton's chance, that header that he missed from Tino Livramento's cross, and how fine the margins were. I don't tend to agree with that. I don't tend to agree that the margins were particularly fine, overall. Anyway, other than that chance and the chance he had in the first half, Newcastle didn't look like scoring. They didn't deserve anything out of the game. Dortmund really didn't have to go out of second gear. That's just my blunt response to how I feel about this game. And yeah, it just felt like a game too far. I think that's, Newcastle had only had 16 available first team players for this game, and that showed, when these injury issues come to hit this hard, eventually when you come to a place like Signal Iduna Park, and in front of that yellow wall, which was electric all night, it was everything it promised to be. It's difficult to respond, and Newcastle couldn't do that. Both goals were avoidable goals. The first time they didn't clear enough, and Fabian Schär was caught too high. They didn't, they could have cleared it so many times before Fulkrug sticks it in the net, and he'd already had a warning shot against Nick Pope. Pope had denied him, and then Adeyemi as well. Adeyemi for me was the player on the park who made the difference for Dortmund. He had a bit of a difficult time at St James's Park. Really showed his quality though in this game. Absolutely electric across the front three. Caused Lewis Hall problems at times, caused Tino Livramento problems at times, Kieran Trippier problems at times. Everybody was struggling to deal with picking him up, and that was a real shame. That Newcastle couldn't get a hold on him and build from there. I thought there were moments in the first half where Bruno had a little bit more influence on the game. Second half, where Tino Livramento was brilliant. I think overall, actually, Livramento was Newcastle's best player. That cross that he put in for Joe Linton for that chance, but just generally, he was the player that I think turned up best, and got special praise from Eddie Howe in the press conference afterwards as well. But overall, there was a lack of quality on that level. I think Joe Willock had moments in the second half, but generally, but overall, Newcastle just couldn't didn't really lay a glove on Dortmund throughout. It was quite easy for Dortmund, and from the moment, the first minute when they broke through, that sort of set the tone for the game, and Newcastle didn't really have much of an answer for that, and they paid the price. Now it looks very difficult for Newcastle to get through their group. Unfortunately, that's just they go to Paris needing a victory. We'll find out what the score from the PSG Milan game is later, but it feels like now Europa League is more likely for Newcastle, given how how damaging these two defeats have been. And as I say, Eddie Howe says that Newcastle haven't shown themselves the best of themselves to Dortmund. There are reasons for that, partly because £260 million of quality isn't on the pitch now. Newcastle should have had Alexander Isak up front, returning to Dortmund a much better player than he left. Sven Botman is a huge miss at the back as well. Just the tone that those players particularly set for Newcastle was badly missed this evening. And yeah, it's a performance that I think reflects how stretched the squad is. Eddie Howe started with both Miggy Almiron and Anthony Gordon on the bench, which is something that I think coming to a place like this he'd absolutely not want to do, but he felt compelled to do that given that he's got Bournemouth on Saturday away, and minutes have to be managed. There was one line from Callum Wilson. He was asked whether he's joined the injury list. He was told that we were told that it was too early to say. You might well know more by the time you're watching this video on that, but it feels like another chastening night on that front as well, the injury front going into Bournemouth, but proves again how much Eddie Howe had to manage the situation with the minutes. And I think he would have absolutely loved to start Almiron and Gordon up front with Wilson if he could, but it just wasn't possible because of the workload that these players have put in. Another thing that Eddie Howe was saying was that he thought that the game came too quickly after Arsenal. The amount of effort and energy that they put into that victory just sort of took it out of them, and when you come here to a place like this with Dortmund's record in the Champions League and Dortmund's home record generally, I know they lost quite heavily to Bayern and Klassiker at the weekend. You've got to be at your best, and Newcastle weren't really. And it's easy to say that after the fact, obviously the scenes before the game. There's a lot of sort of partying and a lot of hope and going into this game. And actually, when you think about the group draw and how difficult it was, and the reality that's becoming patently clear if it wasn't already, these two games against Dortmund were where Newcastle were expecting to pick up points, and the victory over PSG maybe gave a little bit of false hope and a little bit of a false situation as to where Newcastle are going to be. We're going to be in this group. And then they came up against the Dortmund side at St James's Park that did a number on them, and they did a number on them in a different sense tonight. They were much more front foot than they were at St James's Park in an obvious sense, because they had the yellow wall roaring them on, and the atmosphere was everything you'd hope and expect it to be. So yeah, very, very good atmosphere, really good to be here and witness. What is it? It's a night for perspective for Newcastle. This is one of those nights where it's about the project, and it's about where Newcastle go from here, given that they've come so far in 2 years. It's easy to say this now, but these nights were not the nights that were predicted for this season. I think Newcastle have done brilliantly to get where they are, and they've a bit like the cup final back in February. It reminds me of that, where they've got to these big occasions and then just not quite been at their best for whatever reason. Specifically, I think the number of injuries that they've got, the workload that the individual players that have been put under. We've seen that with Kieran Trippier's performances, how he's lacking that fitness, that sharpness that makes him so effective. And I thought it was another of his poor performances. I like Wolves. Obviously, the goal came from his free kick. It didn't beat the first man. Then Julian Brandt breaks and he's 2-on-1 with Livramento. It makes his mind up, and the finish is emphatic, and that's good night. Newcastle, though, as I say, there were moments of good play. They were building themselves in the second half, but aside from that Joe Linton chance, I can't really recall a gilt-edged opportunity in the second half where they would have equalised, and maybe that would have been a different thing. As I say, the head-to-head rule makes this such a difficult now group to progress from, because they've already lost to Dortmund twice, and now a gap has opened up to Dortmund as well, which wasn't there after the home leg. PSG away was always going to be the toughest group game. They're going to be expecting something that they perhaps weren't at St James's Park. It's not going to be a walkover then, and who knows where the Milan game will be come December. That shows how tight these margins were in this group, and how tight every game was going to be. Newcastle have not disgraced themselves in any game. They've been competitive. I thought they were very good in Milan. I thought they were obviously excellent against PSG. And I thought there were moments in these games where, and I completely agree with Eddie Howe, if they were at their best, they would have given Dortmund a much better evening. But it felt like a game too far. It felt like one of those games where Newcastle were swallowed up by the occasion. That's likely to happen. When Lewis Hall is making his Champions League debut, when Tino Livramento is making his Champions League debut. Another word for Livramento. I know I've mentioned him already, but I thought this was another brilliant performance from him. Livramento has again shown that he's ready for this level, and that's only a good thing going forward when Trippier, the workload on Trippier is as it is. And I think this is an evening where Dortmund showed their nous. And again, you've got to remember that these three clubs, both Dortmund, Milan and PSG, have been at this level so many times, and Newcastle are new to it at the point that they are. So brilliant couple of days, brilliant, absolutely fantastic at the Square earlier. Fantastic to be in Dortmund, fantastic to witness the Yellow Wall. I'll be there in Paris to see how that gets on, how they get on there. There'll be an analysis piece again from me on the BBC Sport website tomorrow. I'll see you for a preview of the Bournemouth game on Friday. Thank you very much for joining me in these last few days. I really enjoyed bringing the content, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.